This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I am your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing. All right, so for this installment of One More Thing, we are responding to something shared here on the Black Information Network by our very own James T. Harris. Before we get to that, I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
I am Q Ward, here with you today as well.
And we'll get right to it.
If I Were the Devil by Paul Harvey was originally broadcasted in 1965. In that broadcast, he revealed what he would do if he were the devil to destroy America's culture and undermine our collective societal standards and social mores. Instagram influencer Director Phil has updated Paul Harvey's famous broadcast by telling us what he would do if he was racist, white, and rich.
If I were a rich white racist that hated black people, this is what I would do. I would handpick young black boys, mostly from single mother households who want to be rappers, and pay them millions of dollars to make music geared to destroying the black communities. I would make young black women become dependent on government assistance, but only if there's no father in the home. I would dump drugs into poor black communities, incentivize them to sell it and use it to cope with their problems, then put them in prison. I would turn black women against black men, making them disrespect them and hate them. I would use black celebrities, daytime TV, magazines, and the media to help push this. I would then poison their food and make it cheap so that poor blacks can afford to buy it, which will slowly kill them off. Then I'll implement liberal politicians and celebrities. They'll sell them truthful sounding lies. They'll pretend to relate to them. They'll make them think that Republicans are only for the rich and we're for the poor. Even though we live in big houses and safe neighborhoods far away from you poor blacks. And for my final trick, I'll cut them off at the source. I'll stop them from reproducing. I'll make abortion their get out of jail free card. I won't even have to kill black people. I'll just stop them from ever being born. And I'll make sure black women have abortions at a much higher rate than white women. They'll never suspect a thing because we'll make up some catchy slogan, something like my body, my choice. Yeah, that'll get them. We'll keep them broke, emotional, childless, and fatherless. And the best part is they'll still vote for us.
Like Malcolm X said, the white liberal is the worst enemy to Black America. I'm James T. Harris for the Black Information Network.
Okay, so that to me was very difficult to listen to. People like that are very frustrating to me. Both of them. And, we can be on the same team and not have to like really see the world the same way. So I don't mean no disrespect to, anybody that's playing on the same team as me, but when I have a mic and I have an audience, I feel like I have a responsibility to tell the truth according to the world that I grew up in. I resent the idea that I have been brainwashed. Even listening to those voices, I would not even receive criticism in terms of my mental faculties from a person whose enunciation doesn't go past that level. Either of those people. So I don't take anything personally, but there is. I don't want to turn this into an intellectual argument or response, because I'm not the type to argue with people. Certainly not people like that. But I'm going to try my best to break this down line by line, because there are things that people like that get off, and because they got it off with a little bit of like bad acting and drama and some sort of flair that helps sell it on social media, which I'll add, didn't even sell it that well. We looked up the video and it wasn't even at 1 million views, which, It has a good number of views, but certainly not something that would warrant you going to check it out yourself. There's really nothing else to it. But it's important to push back when these things pop up, because if you listen to enough of that stuff, it will start to make you question a very well-founded reality in which you live. And someone has to hold the line. And today that someone is Q Ward, and the other someone is Ramses Ja.
Truthful sounding lies. I was actually shocked that he stepped in that so forwardly.
Jumped in it.
That he said those words caught me off guard. Because as I listened to everything that he said and how brilliantly he did it, you could listen to that
without context.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
Right? And you could listen to that, and at the end of it, like you said, question your own reality. Like, yo, have I been tricked or played? Because there's enough truth there for you to not question the intentions. Hey, this brother just keeping it real. He just telling me how it is. All that stuff is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Black women are having abortions at a higher rate. Rappers are talking about things that I don't want my children to do. There are a lot of famous people that are aligning themselves with the liberal side of our politics. And I think the author, the orator, I think their intention was to push this as nonpartisan.
Neutral, yeah. They're both very, very clearly, obviously right-leaning.
And then that's where the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
If the same brother was saying all this same stuff and put this at the feet of the American government entirely, I would have received it a lot different.
Mm-hmm.
He's placing this at the feet of liberals, as if Republicans are the answer, the anecdote, the heroes who are going to save us here. And are either of you guys paying any attention at all? Or do you just want to sound intelligent and quote unquote woke and informed and more intellectually superior than other black people? So you just adopt a contrarian position, say a bunch of stuff together real fast and semi-passionately, laugh really strangely at the end of the video, like that's your gotcha moment, and press upload and put your phone down and feel really good about yourself.
Yeah, we good now. We got that off.
And you mentioned the number of views. I won't pretend that that's insignificant.
But we have videos that are
sure, but this is my point. This isn't
the sort of thing to look up to.
This is my point. If 25 people hear that and agree, we have a problem.
It did his job. Yeah, that's fair.
So if 750,000 people see it and 10% of those people are like, dang, man, he's right, we have a problem. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that those numbers are insignificant. That's scary.
Yeah.
Because there are so many that are uninformed, that don't know how to do proper scholastic research, that don't know what sources to trust, that don't have a counterbalance. There's no person in their life saying the opposite of this stuff. And they're young, impressionable, lost, or disenfranchised. They do feel like the government has failed them in all these ways. They were raised by a single mother, or they are a single mother. And if there's somebody who can tell them the reason why you're a single mother and why your kid sags his pants and thinks that drugs are cool is because the liberals did X, Y, and Z, and you don't have any real answers, this person did his job.
You know what's the crazy thing, though, is that, so we're here to provide some context, right? Most of the things, and we'll break them down, but most of these things are a function of capitalism. I'm sure you would agree. They, in and of themselves, are a function of capitalism, which props up
all of them.
Thank you, but
not
it props
most
up
of them.
But it props up white supremacy. I don't want to pretend like black people or any people are blameless in terms of their culture. There are some cultural things that everyone's working on. Cultures evolve, right? Every single culture, and it's not a pursuit of perfection, it's just constant evolution of culture. But so when we're discussing capitalism, right? Because to your point, Q, all of them are the result of capitalistic forces, right? Which, to be fair, does prop up white supremacy.
And
quite
important to
nicely.
say, it props up white supremacy because white supremacy,
it has a
white supremacist foundation.
Yeah, absolutely.
There could be a form of capitalism that propped up another group if another group had created the system and all of its tent poles and all of its foundation.
Sure.
In this country, and in most countries in the world,
that's the one.
Capitalism, where it exists, was started by white people in positions of power, and then everything was designed to make sure that those people were perpetually in power.
Right. Now, the thing about this is that once you've successfully made an argument that these things are the result of capitalistic forces, this idea that this influencer, Director Phil, shared by our own James T. Harris and echoed by him, indeed, his point that he's trying to make is that I would convince black people that Republicans are for the rich and that we're for the poor, right? In that bar, he's acknowledging that there's an association with Republicans and rich people. And we've made the connection already with rich people and capitalism. Yeah, does that not put Republicans right back in the middle of this conversation?
But what he's trying to do is convince us that we've been tricked that that's the case. So he's not saying that's the case. Again, adding to this idea that you've been brainwashed.
But he's telling on himself.
No, to us he is.
Yeah,
but what a lot of people don't like to be is cattle, sheep, brainwashed, followers. So position someone as that, and their contrarian instinct kicks in. Well, no, I want to be a free thinker. I want to come up with my own ideas. Have we been tricked into thinking that Republicans are for the rich? Oh my God. We've been duped, Ramses. We've been taken advantage of. I too have been tricked. Republicans are not for the rich. White liberals established this way of thinking.
Okay, so let me
break the shackles.
So let me jump in here for folks that might feel that way. White liberals. White liberals. We have an interesting relationship with white liberals in this country. White liberals are imperfect, the same as any group of human beings are imperfect. Sure. White liberals haven't always gotten it right. Yes, white liberals, if you do this scholastic research, are the reason that black women are more unmarried now than historically they've been. Failed policies, ill-conceived policies, things like this, have shaped our reality. 3 strikes laws, things like this that have put, black men in prison, permanently, put them away. Life sentences for stealing bikes and stuff like that. There has been harm done to black people by white liberals. But white liberals are also the ones responsible for the emancipation of the slaves. It took white people who were progressive to fight for a people that wasn't theirs against an enemy that they conceivably didn't have to fight, to live in a reality where their prospects would be worse. When all of us were powerless, white liberals were the ones that helped us get double rights in this country. White liberals many have gone unnamed in the black story of America, but their allyship has been felt and it will echo throughout history. You and I work in the space of allyship, and often enough, the overwhelming majority of allies we find tend to be liberal. Seldom do we find conservative allies for our decidedly black and brown plight.
Yeah, that's almost a singular reality for us.
Almost,
like every
yeah.
time we think about it, there's like one.
Yep, we only have one in our story. And I'm not even sure that I would call him a conservative. He might just simply be a fiscal
I
conservative.
call him a conservative based on what that meant traditionally.
Sure.
Today's right-wing Republican,
Doesn't look like that.
this
That's fair.
is a different monster altogether.
So, again, for people, for those of us in the know, for those of us that have lived a long life, those of us who have had to kind of work in this political space, a conversation like a take like this, it feels baseless, and it feel like what is the basis here? But let's go through it line by line, okay?
Kind of idea by idea, because
Okay.
we don't have
Yeah.
every line he said in
Yeah,
front of
yeah.
us.
So again, James T. Harris shared this take from an Instagram person named Director Phil, a video that is semi-viral. Okay. If I were a rich white racist
That hates black people.
that hates black people, ultimately that evolves to be a rich white liberal racist.
Yeah.
But this is how he wants it framed in the beginning, okay? All right. Says he's going to take young black boys and incentivize them to become rappers and talk about all of this stuff and degrade the culture, whatever his thing is, right? And I think that leaves so much context out. A lot of people become rappers because they see how there's an entrepreneurial component to becoming a rapper. The people that are born just with the words in their heart like that, those don't tend to be the rappers that this person is highlighting in his take, echoing, the things that they've seen around them. The people that are born with the words in their heart, they tend to be like the Mos Defs or the Yasin Beys or the Talib Kweli's or the Dilated Peoples, those types of people. Like the griots, think in terms of Africa, like the people that have stories to tell, words come naturally to them. This is what they were born to do. The music speaks to them, right? The rest of these folks, the people that this Director Phil gentleman is trying to highlight, are people that are in pursuit of the entrepreneurial element of hip hop music, right? And so now we're back to the forces of capitalism, which work on all people in a society. This is the game that we're playing. This is the way the society is stratified, and this is how you ascend the ranks, okay? For some people, it's basketball, football, rap, sell dope. That's the only thing they see. That's the only thing they got. The only thing that makes real sense to them, because they're like, look, I can't go to the post office and work my whole life away and then die, and then my life was at the post office. That just won't be for me. So in terms of the other prospects, what's realistic for them is those four options I mentioned, right? Again, capitalism. I can make a compelling argument that is very true. But the way that this individual is framing it is like there is some wicked, rich, white liberal whose sole motivation is to ruin the lives of black people. And if that were true, then that person would not necessarily make money off of rappers, right? People make the music that's popular. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's attacking porn. Nobody's attacking action movies. More people dying.
Films in general.
You know
It
what I
doesn't
mean?
have to be action movies. There are movies that have a far more harmful message and visual than some of these songs
Absolutely.
that we're talking about.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. The other part of this too is that, there are people that will say, well, when you look at the way that rappers behave, when you look at the way that, rappers, they get killed at higher rates than other genres of music, what you're seeing is a reflection of an element of society that you're not exposed to. You know, there's a lot of people who die and they're not rappers, but they are in those same rapper quote unquote environments. What happens when you become a rapper is you and all your friends from where you are, now you get to travel around and move around, and your friends that are with you, this happens to athletes too, you know, but your friends that get to travel with you, they're not the rapper and they want to earn their keep and they want to show that they're the most loyal, and they might start something or try to protect you from something or step into something, or something might get set off. Not to mention, if you're a rapper and you're from a hood and you go into another hood or even your own hood, and now you've elevated and now you have something, you have a watch that costs thousands and necklaces and whatever else. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities that a person could see you and feel like, listen, if I could catch this guy slipping, that could change my life. Or it could just be envy. Could be you have access to the things that I want. There's a lady I like. There's whatever, right? So I think the extremes are higher when you're looking at the rap world versus like the rock and roll world and the pop music world. You know what I mean? Like the poorest of the poor get elevated to the richest of the rich, and they still are from there. Their families are still there in the hood. There's whatever. And so there's context missing here from this person saying.
But again, that's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
They'd want us to believe that there was a nefarious plot by some liberal white person that's racist and hates black people, which is a very strange Venn diagram of things to be on one person. You won't meet very many anti-black racist liberals. Almost every person in this country that is specifically anti-black racist is Republican.
Oh yeah.
Almost 100% of the time.
Yeah. That's as simple as you. Thank you for making it as simple as it can be.
Let's start there. Yeah. Secondly, this liberal, racist, anti-black person who discovered and created hip hop for the sole purpose of tearing down the black community. Like, as you hear me saying this, it should start to sound ridiculous, right? We know that there's no such person, but we know that that's also not how hip hop came to be. And the music business, just like every other business that exists in a capitalist system, is exploitative by nature. So like Ramses said, take the most popular version of it and sell it a lot so we can make money. Mm-hmm. This nefarious, racist, white liberal didn't create rap music to make black men millionaires to tear the black community down. That was not the plan. They wouldn't have structured it that way.
Black people, to be fair, created hip hop ourselves. Shout out to Kool Herc. Shout out to
the list is too long and we'd be here too long.
Yeah, but,
and there's a bunch of points that we have to cover. So let me make this point. The Vietnam War was a very unpopular war, but it was happening far away from here before information was so accessible, before information got to us as fast as it did, right? Mm-hmm. So those who opposed the war and felt like, what can I do, took their cameras, got on a plane, and flew to Asia. And they started recording and taking pictures of what was happening in Vietnam. They didn't create Vietnam. Mm-hmm. They didn't make Vietnam to make the Asian people look bad, to make the Vietnamese look criminal, or to make Americans. They didn't do that to create a propaganda that was anti-American or anti-Vietnam. They just knew, if I could show people what's happening over there, and then we have to talk about why it's happening, my view of this thing that shouldn't be happening will be shared if people could see it. Tupac Shakur very famously had Thug Life written across his stomach, even though he raps across his chest. And the hate you give little infants, everybody, is what those letters broke down to mean. And Tupac felt, just like the photographers in Vietnam, if I could tell our story, how it feels to be Brenda and have a baby, how it feels to come from the communities that we come from, where we're born into poverty, where we don't have options of how we're ever going to escape here. And we have to figure out a way to survive and for our children to be able to eat, because we're born into circumstances that were put into place by a government in its totality, not by the liberals. If we had to pick a group, if you're paying attention at all, because they don't hide it, like they're not pretending to not be against us.
Who did the Ku Klux Klan vote for?
Yeah. Who did the Ku Klux Klan vote for will kind of give you your answer.
Go ahead.
But Tupac and other rappers are telling you a story about where they're from a lot of the times, even if it's not their story. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. Ramses is from Compton, California. You guys see what we do for a living. But I don't even have to go around the corner, down the street, or across the street to tell you a much different story. My brother, same house, same mom, same church, same schools, made very different decisions because he had a little brother and a mom and a sister and kids to take care of, and made some different decisions to me to try to make the best reality for us. The people in charge would say the things that he did were crimes. Except some of those things, you can go into the equivalent of an Apple store today to purchase the very same things. Those who get to shape the reality get to tell us what's wrong, what's legal, what's illegal. So the idea that the racist white liberals created rap to control the black community with these images and messages of the things that we're already going through is ridiculous. It should sound that way, except when you say all this stuff really fast and then laugh really hard at the end and then slam the mic down and get offline. You got that off, like Ramses said. Yeah. And for those who are uninformed and who don't know how to combat misinformation, you're going to successfully change the minds of some people who are looking for a direction to go.
The next thing he says here, young black women, let's get them on welfare, and they can only qualify for welfare if there's no father. Right.
Truthful sounding lies.
So first off, white women are the biggest recipients of welfare in the United States of America. The welfare program, and this is something that I could stand to be corrected, but I don't think that I'm wrong. The welfare system that we, as we understand it today, was born out of the Great Depression era, United States. It did not have black people in mind necessarily. It had, poor rural white people in mind. And those tend to be still the largest recipients of welfare. But the idea that the majority of black women are on welfare, and the majority of black children are fatherless is, it's pervasive. Black women are the most educated group of human beings in the United States of America. Black men are the best fathers by race in the United States of America.
And best is relative, right? But most present.
Oh.
Most involved, most active.
That's a headline too, but that's a New York Times headline, and that's something you're welcome to verify. Again, there is a CDC report on fatherhood, and I believe it was the most recent census, or the data was taken from the most recent census, or at least a recent census from the Center for Disease Control, CDC, which is a government agency. This is not Ramses and Q's hopes and dreams. This is, factual data from the same government that this person is who's not even trying to fry the whole government, just, half of it. But yeah, the point is that there's a lot of context missing. Are there black women on welfare? Sure, absolutely. But again, there's a lot missing from that. And what has happened is that people have taken an idea of a welfare queen that was born in, I think the welfare queen idea was born in the 80s sometime. That is a Republican conjuring to suggest that poor black women are cheating the system and sucking all of the country's resources away via the welfare system. And again, most of the people on the welfare system are white women. Okay, but if you were to think about welfare, you would think black women, because Republicans did that to you. They did it to me too.
Yeah, and they did that to you to cover their own tracks, right? The government in its entirety is who, if you're going to point blame at the entire system. But this, again,
that was a Republican government.
Yeah, it's a truthful sounding lie.
Yeah.
Our country has in place now, and this is Republican legislation, Republican initiatives, where rich people can make so much money that after a point it's not taxed anymore. But if you're on government assistance and you make too much money, they will take the assistance away from you. Who do you guys think put in such policies? It wasn't anti-black racist white liberals, I'll tell you that.
All right, next on the list, if I were a rich white racist, I would put drugs in the black community and put black people in prison. All right, so
truthful sounding lies. I'm going to keep saying that.
You should,
because that's
what he said. Yeah.
That statement by itself is not false.
Yeah.
That drugs were put into the black community,
no, we about to
and
talk
then
about
black people were then
it.
Turned into criminals because of it.
We're going to talk about it.
But that was not done. Like, this is why this is so brilliant. He said there's a bunch of stuff that's happening and then pointed to liberals and said,
like they
did it.
Yeah.
They created and constructed all this stuff.
And he's clearly a conservative, and it was all conservative people that did it.
Goodness, man.
So, and the conservative people, again, are the rich people that he tries to stick the landing about, and he's trying to do some smoke and mirrors, man. It's crazy. Anyway, yes, drugs in the black community. This primarily refers to the crack epidemic. But I'm going to take it back a step further. Many people may know, but it turns out a lot of people don't. I had a conversation recently with a white woman who's super duper ally. She had no idea that marijuana, once upon a time, was not considered like a hard drug. It wasn't the sort of thing you would go to jail for. It used to be called reefer. And it wasn't until like the hippies and the Panthers started to take center stage and really challenge the war in Vietnam that people started to that the government started to criminalize marijuana use and marijuana possession, so that the Black Power movement and the hippie movement could be disrupted, so that they could begin to arrest these people, because everything else,
resistance was too popular.
You know what I mean? And so by criminalizing these elements associated with hippies, associated with black people, Negro jazz and their reefer, right? By criminalizing those, that they were able to disrupt those movements. There's a quote, I think it might be from either an FBI director, maybe it's J. Edgar Hoover, or maybe it's I couldn't tell you right now, but there's a famous quote, and this individual copped to it. I think he later became a president, or it was either an FBI director or a president, but a popular name in history. The name escapes me right now. And he's on record as saying that yes, we were criminalizing those substances so that we could disrupt those communities, right? And that had a snowball effect. Are black people imprisoned at the same rates as white people for the same crimes? Not at all. I recall a study that I came across that suggested that black people and white people use marijuana at the same rates. And if you were to ask yourself, are black people and white people imprisoned at the same rates? I think you would know the answer is no for those crimes, or what once were crimes. And then that points to over-policing. And the sentencing, of course, is longer when a black person is convicted of a crime, right? So what we're looking at is a government that has imposed these strange laws to disrupt these movements, these shows of black strength and black unity, and then keeping black people incarcerated longer. Later, when the drugs become legal, the licenses to grow the marijuana, the licenses to sell the marijuana, do those end up in the hands of the black people that paid the cost, that were on the how do I want to say this? The unfair end of the government? Not at all. You know, they went all back to white folks. And now there are some successful, black people in the marijuana space. I don't want to act like that's not true, but the forces of capitalism are mighty, and black people, we got our movements disrupted. We got the fathers that were taken out of the home. A lot of them did end up dead or in prison. And at the end of the day, we got nothing when the government said, you know what, we can make this legal now. So that's where we ended up with that.
I need to read this quote that Ramses is talking about to give you guys some insight. You want to know what this was really all about, he asked, with the bluntness of a man who, after public disgrace and a stench in federal prison, had little left to protect. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalize both heavily, we could disrupt these communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
What's his name?
This gentleman's name was John Ehrlichman, who was the head of the President's Council for Richard Nixon. Both of these men, Republicans.
Oh, all right. That was what I was looking for. Thank you, Q. Appreciate that.
Not anti-black racist liberals.
All right. Turn black women against black men. All right. So let's talk about that. Turn black women against black men. Haven't really seen too much of that.
I was going to say this one won't be long.
Yeah, I don't really know where to go with that.
Yeah, this one won't be long. It's one of those things that you
love
say
black women.
and they love us.
Yeah,
that's
super
the point,
duper.
right? That's the point. Of course we love them, but this point is that they don't love us. And it's ridiculous.
Well, we love them, so we're around black women, like
Yes.
in mass, in huge groups.
Say something enough times out loud unchecked and people believe it. That's the simple response to that line, because it's based on nothing. Like, these things are based on something. So we kind of went in and debunk a little bit and give you a little bit more context and nuance and color and information. Yeah. There's nothing to give here.
Yeah,
this is nonsense.
Isaac Hayes put up a good friend of ours, Isaac Hayes III from Fanbase. Shout out to Fanbase one time. He put up a post recently and he said something like, 83% of black men that make six figures or more a year are married to black women. Something like that.
Yeah, but that's another narrative that we don't love them.
Yeah.
Again,
but
this But specifically, because I don't want us to stray too far from the false
What-
point
that
that he's trying to make.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
That they don't love us.
Okay.
They don't love or respect us.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I've been with the National Council of Negro Women. I've been with the AKAs. I've been with the where we go? Jack and Jill. Where else have we been?
We've been with the Deltas. We've been with the Zetas. We've been
Talk
with the
to
SG
me.
Rose.
Talk
We've
to
been
me.
with the AKAs.
Keep going.
Come on.
Talk
man.
to me, Q.
We've been with
All of 'em.
not just organized groups of black women, but the communities that we grew up in. We
Yeah.
have sisters. We have like
in the home. Yeah.
come on, man.
And the way the black women talk to us, and not just us, because Q and I understand we're like outside activists, fist up, all of that. But like the way the black women talk to the black men that we see,
and the way that black women show up more than any
for
other
black
group.
men.
Not just for black men, for everybody. Like the black
Jesus.
woman. There's a viral video of this Middle Eastern gentleman, I believe, talking about what his mother taught him when he was a kid. When you leave me, when you go to America, or when you go anywhere in the world, if you want to feel safe, find a black woman.
There you go.
So miss
I
me
know
with
that.
this nonsense. Like, this is the part that made me the most mad. Cause you lying. Some black women love you.
Still. All right.
And if they don't, this is why.
That'll do it.
Not because they're black women taught to hate you by racist white liberals.
I'm gonna ask something right here.
Truthful sounding lies.
Let me ask something right here. I think you're gonna like this, Q. My heart broke when Kamala Harris lost that election. For me.
My heart is still broken.
But my heart broke more for the people whose heart would be broken more. And one person in particular that I just couldn't get out of my head is our manager, Brandy. Brandy is a black woman. Brandy is an AKA. Brandy shares a lot of time and space with Dr. Westenberg. Brandy was with us on the ground day in and day out. And I remember Brandy smiling so much through that campaign season. She was so happy. She was, there was so much coming her way. And I couldn't stop thinking about her. And that was like, when you're sad for yourself, but it's like, I'll be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be okay. I'll figure this out, but I'm worried about my people. Brandy and countless other black women. I've seen resilience. I've seen resolve. I've seen, like you said, they're still here for everybody. Mad. It's not a happy time, but listen, everybody else start bickering. Everybody else start getting mad at everybody. Black women is like, okay, we've been here before. We'll get through it. So since we here, shout out to black women. I don't even care about God no more. At the end of my life, I'm going where the black women go. That's what I got to say. All right, cheap poison food. Let's talk about this. Okay, so are there food deserts? Absolutely. Are food deserts associated with poor communities, poor neighborhoods? Absolutely. Some neighborhoods in this country, the only place where you can get food is a Dollar General or a 99-cent store or something
Or
like
McDonald's.
that. That's it. That's the only place where you can
Or
get some
Taco
food.
Bell.
Yep. There are food deserts
Or
in this
somewhere
country.
where you are literally being sold poison.
Yep.
Food that's linked to cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Food that's linked to poor health,
Mm-hmm.
to diabetes, to hypertension, to we could go on and on.
Absolutely.
Again, this is not specific to black people, and this is not something that's specific to racist white liberals, which I have to keep saying out loud because you guys will hear some of this stuff and say, "Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Our food is poison, and it does." And in my neighborhood, there's just liquor stores and McDonald's. Like,
Oh yeah.
that's true, sure,
But that's poor.
but that's poor,
Yep.
and that's a governmental failure comprehensively.
Mm-hmm.
That's not racist white liberals targeting black people.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm going to add something here too.
Truthful sounding lies.
Let me add something.
Director Phil.
Let me add something else here too. One of the things that I find myself being increasingly passionate about is called environmental racism. And environmental racism kind of walks that same line, in that, do we find that this shapes the lives of black people more than white people? Absolutely. But overwhelmingly, it shapes the lives of poor people. And are black people overrepresented in the numbers of poor people? Absolutely. And so we
in the
find
percentages of poor people.
Percentages, thank you.
I'd argue the numbers are probably higher for white people because there's more white people.
More, but thank you for that. Yep. So you start to look at a government as a whole, and corporations, and it goes back to the forces of capitalism. Now, are poor whites more protected than poor blacks? Sure. But at that point, you start to get into the nitty gritty of individual decisions.
Yeah, and I think it would depend on where you and I go with this conversation, because I'd argue that that's not true. I'd argue that that's what they want poor whites to believe. Because if you can get poor whites to believe that they're more protected and less likely to fall victim to these systems that are working against them, you can get them to vote against their own best interest because, well, they're voting against the interest of black people.
So how about, that's where I was going to go with it. So I said what the result is, but not I didn't articulate how the decision would ultimately be made. If I am a wealthy business owner in Missouri somewhere, and there's a poor white neighborhood and a poor black neighborhood, and I'm the decider as an individual, not as a government, but as an individual. If I'm the decider, I don't care about either community, but it's more likely that I would care even less about the poor black neighborhood. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that part is stated, so individuals can let their racism be known.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about, again, the forces of capitalism, I had a conversation once upon a time. I don't mean to. Don't lose your thought. Don't lose your thought.
I won't. I don't think either of us are going to lose our thoughts on this one. Like this one. So
once upon a time, just to make my point, I had a conversation with a program director of mine. I've shared this with you before, and this is about Don Imus saying some racist stuff on his show back in the day. And my program director said, "Well, you know what? Ain't no sense in firing the man. Let the free market decide whether or not he should keep his job." And I said, well, you know, the free market, that's all well and good, but it overrepresents the people with money, and it underrepresents the people that don't have money. And what you're trying to do is make a moral argument where no moral argument can be made. Those forces of capitalism overrepresent the interest of people that don't know what it's like to be a black woman and to be insulted by being called a nappy-headed hoe on the basketball court. And you know better than that, and I know better than that, and it doesn't matter how much money you have or I have, we both can say that that's wrong. And so I think that illustrates the point of how capitalism works in these type of situations, where a wealthy white man who has some racist leanings in Missouri can shape the outcomes, decide which outcomes to shape in his own community. And so that was the point I was trying to make. All right.
No, point well made. And my point will be short because you said most of it, right? If the decision is between something that's going to help poor white people versus poor black people, the choice will be the poor white people. The thing is, there's not very many of those choices. Yeah. If it's something that helps poor people, period, they're not interested in it. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. And they talk poor people out of being interested in it because they remove the idea of empathy. They actually poison the idea of empathy. You want your hard work to help someone else while they're lazy and just sit on their butts and do nothing. Like, they create this narrative that doesn't exist. They treat it like we, and by we I mean black people, are incentivized by poverty. Like, we'd rather be poor. We'd rather be on the brink of homelessness so we can get the $300 assistant check. But only white people are motivated by the prosperity of capitalism, right? So that's why they create programs that are rich socialism. They'll help each other forever and create programs where they get breaks for being rich because they're not incentivized by assistance. It's a meritocracy in capitalism where those who work the hardest get the best results, right? So only in America, more so than anywhere else in the world, do rich people make poor people think that helping each other is bad, while all they do is help each other.
All right, for our next one here, this director Phil, gentleman, says that if he was a rich white racist, he left off the term liberal, but that's the point he's trying to make, suggesting that liberals are somehow the source of all that ails black people in this country. He says that he would install liberal politicians and celebrities to make black people think that Republicans are only for the rich and we're for the poor. So this is the point in the conversation where he lets his true colors be known, that he's not unbiased, politically
and I think
speaking.
he did that by mistake.
Yeah, me too.
He thought he was flexing, making a
Nah,
point
he
there, and all
showed
he
his
did
true
was
colors.
show his hand.
Yeah, that's it. So, again, I'll go back to the point that I made originally. White liberals are not perfect. No group is perfect. There are a lot of things, a lot of significant things that were done by white liberal governments, white liberal presidents, white liberal community leaders, white liberal individuals that were ill-conceived, that caused a lot of harm. I'll be the first to admit that. But in our story in this country, the monumental steps forward that we've taken as black people have been with the help and the support and the full bolstering of white liberals.
And I just need to say this now because it's so in line with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
The monumental steps forward have been with the assistance of white allies. We don't even have to say whether they're conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, right? All of the steps backwards.
Go ahead.
Most monumental
Go ahead.
were by right-wing, Republican, conservative, white people.
Go ahead.
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
All of them.
Well said.
And maybe the party wasn't called Republican back then because we get this semantic argument too.
Yeah.
It was the Democrats that did well. Yeah, back then, the party called Democrats were the Republicans of today. Like it's that simple.
Yeah.
Plainly, and we won't pretend that everything they've done for us has been benevolent.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things were also in their best interest, right?
Sure, yeah.
So sure, but one side has only ever done things to harm us. Ever. And today, when Ramses says our hearts are broken, man, I really still think people don't know yet. You know, the election happened and the world didn't go to hell immediately. So people looked around like, oh, this ain't that bad. Well, the man hasn't been inaugurated yet. It's coming.
Yeah.
And it's far worse than you guys think.
Oh, it's gonna ripple long after he's dead.
Ronald Reagan made decisions as president that we have not recovered from yet.
They affect us right now.
So again, the Republican, conservative, actual anti-black people have done irreparable damage to the quality of our lives throughout the history of the United States
all
of
that
America.
poison food, trace that right back to Reaganomics and the Reagan administration. A lot of the stuff you can trace back to the prison and all of the drugs and all. Man, listen.
Education.
Talk to me.
Educational debt. The college being nearly unaffordable. That's intentional by a Republican leadership. But don't let me stop you.
Well, yeah. Him trying to suggest that a rich white racist has duped all black people into thinking that Republicans are only for the rich. It suggests that, well, first off, again, we know that this gentleman, like I saw the one video, I didn't even go through his page, didn't even need to.
Yeah, there's no need.
This dude is a Trumper. And I know that this James T. Harris gentleman that works for the Black Information Network is too. He just is, flat is. Not my kind of folks. You know what I mean? So I ain't need to look at the rest of this dude's stuff. But for these points that you know, Director Phil, whoever this guy is, got off, that James T. Harris echoed at the top of our broadcast or our podcast, depending on where you're listening. For him to get here to suggest that rich white racists are the reasons that black people only vote Democrat and don't vote Republican, it's almost like a slap in the face, like we don't see what's happening and what people are talking about. And the truth is, black men have, I don't mean to be any kind of way, but black men have more mobility in this society still than black women, unfortunately. Black men have, as a result, a greater capacity to imagine foolishly themselves benefiting from a white supremacist society, white supremacist ideas, white supremacist leadership, etc. And they don't even think that that's what it is. They can just see, well, shoot, that's working. Let me get on the good foot and get over there. Yes, sir, boss. Let me, you know, whatever they're on. Black women know better, but also black women don't live in a society where that framework is even accessible.
And this is black women at large.
Right.
Of course, you
not
have
as
like
individuals.
Candace Owen,
yeah, not individually.
Stray into the mind of the white supremacists.
But I think that this is why we see black women overwhelmingly voting the same way in every election. In this last election, I think it was something like 92% black women. And I'd imagine the reason that voted for Kamala Harris. And I think that the reason why it wasn't higher is because of Palestine and in a lot of black women's minds, viable third-party candidates. That doesn't mean that 8% went for Trump.
Can you do me a favor?
Please.
Once upon a time on Civic Cypher, you explained something quite brilliantly, and I'm hoping I can spark your memory. It's completely understandable for black people to feel like the Democratic Party has failed to keep their promises to us. And you explained that in a way on the show that if I was somebody who was leaning Republicans because I felt like I'd been lied to or duped by white liberals all this time because I got some information like this brought to me, you explained to me, or to the audience, to our listener rather, how this type of information could impact a person who that's their actual truth, but why the answer wasn't Republicans.
I wish I knew exactly what that was, but my first mind says that
because there's a reason why language like this lands. Like it's to be a black person in this country, the entire government fails you. So if you've only ever voted Democrat, you might feel like I have been duped by the liberals.
Sure, yeah. I think the thing that comes to mind though, a person that just kind of knows better. It's funny because we're knocking on Dr. King's birthday, so we're doing like prep work around the studio for some upcoming episodes we're doing. But what come to mind is the same roadblocks that Dr. King ran up against. Things like the filibuster, things like having a certain majority, things that black people think are so easy. We voted, we elected you. Why didn't you do the thing that we elected you to do? And because education, like civics 101 type education, is not something that is our strong suit, in terms of our education system in this country. people don't have a solid grasp of what the government is supposed to do and how the government indeed works and how people can ultimately shape the government. And I'll admit, I'm not the person who knows the most either, even though I work here, right? But when I found out that Dr. King was going up against the filibuster, and then I found that we're still in more or less the same boat. When I understood that, okay, I was not born a slave. So somewhere along the line, somebody had to fight a much harder fight than I can even imagine. A lot of people had to fight so that the people who look like me, that were born and they couldn't even imagine what life would be like if they wanted to do something when they grew up. They couldn't, it wasn't even real for them. They couldn't imagine, I want to travel to faraway lands. They couldn't imagine, I want to study that. Nope, they were born slaves and they worked their whole lives and they died young. And people fought for those people. Who am I to complain about the Democrats? You know what I mean? In the time, in the scale of a country, things move slowly. A lot more slowly than I would want, because my life is short, but countries are long.
And especially when the people that created that country created it to function the way they wanted to function.
Exactly, and that's a tough one
all
to undo.
The people that established the country agreed once upon a time on what that outcome was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And that did not include freedoms.
Didn't include us at all.
For us. So somebody had to fight, like you said, a much more difficult fight. And you did get to where I wanted you. So thank you. I know you didn't remember the exact episode or the exact conversation, but you made the exact point. Some people, for whatever their reason is, and we have this conversation all the time, you guys are just feeding the poor because it makes you look good. Even if that's true,
the poor got fed.
We're feeding them. Right? So maybe, like I said, these people weren't benevolent, but they did have to fight against their own best interest to help us. It was not in the best interest of anyone that was white that owned any land or any property to free slaves. Now, once a war broke out, it was in the North's best interest for things to be harder for the South. And it'll be harder for the South if all those black people that work for them indefinitely for free had some rights. So again, I won't pretend that it was benevolent. But for all white people once upon a time, it was in your best interest to have free labor, working your land, watching your kids, sowing your seeds, doing your harvesting, your cleaning, your farming, everything for free. Someone had to say, you know what? That's not right. And I'm going to help bring an end to it. And black people didn't have the power to do that.
We had to rely on other people caring enough about us to take action, and those people were white liberals. Right. If I were a rich white racist, I would stop black people from reproducing. Right. So now we're into the abortion weeds. This guy is, again, still letting his colors be known about his political leanings. This is a very conservative position to take. Or for him to, I mean, you're intelligent enough to know, okay? So this is a very conservative thing. Black women do get abortions at higher rates than other women. And I think that, you know, we're in the same conversation. Black women are the most educated group of people in this country. Black women are, for any number of reasons. I don't profess to know why people do what it is that they do.
I have an idea.
But then I'll say what I'm going to say, and then let's get into that. But I don't know that there is a such thing as a boogeyman or a rich white racist that can compel or force or whatever black women to have abortions. I think that abortions, based on what I know, I've never been pregnant. I will never be pregnant. I don't know what it's like to grow a human being inside of my body, but from what I understand, it's exceptionally emotional and intimate. I don't know that.
And not easy.
I don't know that anybody arrives at that decision easily or as the result of a rich white racist. I think that's something that a person has to find on her own with the help of maybe her partner, her family, maybe her community, whatever that looks like, and whatever her faith looks like. And that I don't know what else to add there. I just feel like that's such a silly thing for this and a hurtful thing for this gentleman to say.
Keep them broke. Childless.
Emotional,
and fatherless. This guy then ends up saying, "My body, my choice," as some anecdotal joke, as some punchline for his mic drop that he thinks he just made. I have 6 sisters. I was raised by a single mother.
Yeah,
the "my body, my choice," I just almost cursed right now. The "my body, my choice" stuff is not for you to make a joke of, sir. I'd love to continue this conversation with you, by the way.
Not me, but I'll be there. You don't want to talk to me.
I have a daughter too, sir.
And Q's being nice.
It is her body, her choice, sir.
Q's the nice one right now.
When I became a father, it was the first time I'd smiled in 5 years almost. And I smiled endlessly.
You still smile.
Because the only thing I wanted to be when I grew up for sure was a father. I'll figure everything else out. But the absence of my father made me really, really, really want to be a father. And I realized once my son got here that it is a instant, comprehensive, life-altering change.
I saw it.
Right now. It's not gradual.
Nope, I saw
it all happens right now.
I saw when you're holding.
And you learn how much different life is going to be moving forward. Mm-hmm. And what I realized is not what I realized, because this wasn't a true feeling, but it was a feeling. I'm not enough for this kid. I don't have enough money. I don't have a stable enough job. I don't have a big enough house. I don't. And these are fears from somebody who's generally confident and competent and able to make a way and provide and all that. But even I, with 11 siblings and the most powerful mother ever and a full support system and a brother like Ramses who would give me everything that he has, his house, his car, all of his food and money, still felt like I don't have enough. In a relationship with his mother. So this wasn't a single parent thing. I had everything that I needed, but even I thought I don't have enough. Imagine if I was a single woman and had way less in the way of support system, resources, money, a place to live, a way to provide for my child. I had all that stuff, and I still had doubts and fears and was terrified. And when my daughter was getting ready to be born and I had been laid off from my job in situations and circumstances that gotten even rougher, even more terrified. But those rougher circumstances still landed me with having everything I needed. So imagine having none of that stuff. And this guy that doesn't love me, who just told me now that he knows that I'm pregnant, that he no longer wants to be with me, tells me about a girlfriend that I didn't know he had, or runs off to some other place because he doesn't have to carry this child. He can remove himself from the responsibility of it and get ghost. I have to carry, grow, nurture, and provide for this child no matter what. And I'm not prepared, and I'm scared, and I'm a Christian, and I'm not married, and my mom and my family and my coworkers, and I'm going to be a baby mama. And I don't have a place to live. This woman wasn't being an irresponsible, quote unquote, welfare queen that was manipulated by the rich, white, liberal, black hater people. She was being a human being. How many of you are not married and not black and have sex? Oh, everybody. Okay. Thanks for answering. So when all those circumstances present themselves, maybe you don't want this baby to have the most difficult upbringing possible. So you go to see a doctor about it and make a decision that I'm sure breaks your heart. Because maybe like me, your whole life, you wanted to grow up and be a parent. But so you can get your bar off on Instagram, you make this video and that's how you close it? With the my body, my choice joke, you clown.
Let's jump him. I was there when both of your children were born, and you made me really happy. I was really happy to see you with your babies, and yeah. And you've been a good uncle to my sons too. So, all right. Last thing he says, with a quote from Malcolm X, says,
I don't think this was Director Phil anymore. I think this was James, the Malcolm X quote.
"Okay, all right. Well, James, your turn
again. We can play it back to make sure. Since, I know they get us.
They both can get it.
They get us on semantics on here. If we
I ain't worried about it.
We say E before I or I before E wrong. It's,
no, I'm not worried about it. Right. Quote is from Malcolm X, says, "The white liberal is the worst enemy to black America." Okay, so
again, intentionally stated without context.
Yeah,
truthful sounding lies.
Yeah, let me add something here. Okay. The white liberal moves slower than the black liberal would prefer in many instances. The white liberal risks less than the black liberal would prefer in many instances. It's their path to walk. We are often at the mercy of their decisions to pick up a picket sign, or their decisions to, go down and appeal to, elected officials, or whatever the case is. It is the way of the country that we live in, and has been this way the whole time. And James Baldwin, Malcolm X, Dr. King's frustration with white liberals is often born out of that part of it. Not that they are this evil enemy that is making life worse, but rather that they are liberal when they want to be, for many of them. They are liberal when it's convenient. They are allies when it's convenient. This is probably a better way to say it. They're allies when it's convenient. They take risks when it's convenient or less impactful. And on and on and on. Right. And so again, there's a little bit more context here. And again, I've said, this will be my third time saying, white liberals are not a perfect group of people. Sometimes I go to protests and sometimes I don't. I'm not at every protest. I don't show up to every battle I'm invited to. I don't believe that makes me an evil, manipulative, whatever. I just, I have the bandwidth that I have, and outside of that, I don't. With that said, I understand what Malcolm X is saying here, and I understand what Dr. King has said when he made his comments, and I understand, of course, as I mentioned, James Baldwin, Stokely, how Eldridge, how long do you want the list to go? Huey, and I still think that we get where we're going to get together. I still think that we have brothers and sisters who were born with ancestry that takes them back to the Caucasus Mountains. And there are brothers and our sisters, and they have a different path and different lessons to learn. And they love us, and they're doing their best to show us that love the best way they know how. And it's up to us to teach them what loving us looks like. We are the older siblings. We are the oldest siblings on this planet. Indeed, we are not even siblings. We are the fathers and the mothers of human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens. And so it is not strange for us to be the teachers. I am glad that we had a chance to push back against this nonsense. Don't let Director Phil divide us, confuse us, cause us to doubt the reality in which we live. Don't let even James T. Harris do that. Trust yourself, trust your path, trust what's in your heart. Most of us got it, and we'll continue to get it.
The person I'm most likely to agree with on everything is me. And even I be tripping sometimes. So I don't agree with 100% of things that I've said before.
Mm-hmm.
So ending this thing with a quote from Malcolm X, as if that's the exclamation point on this ridiculous theory or narrative you're trying to push. Clever, because for some people that's enough, man. If that's what Malcolm said, then I'm riding with Brother Malcolm. But this is why Ramses and I think some of you are a part of a cult. You agree with everything that dude say that was the president last time. Everything, even when he says ridiculous and does ridiculous things that would be insulting to you, your mother, your daughter, your family members, you've decided that 45 is the guy and MAGA, and so everything he does and says you agree with. That's ridiculous. I don't agree with everything Barack did and said. I don't agree with everything Dr. King did and said. I don't agree with everything that Ramses does and says. And I spend as much time with Ramses as I do with my children. We do this work that we do every day, and we are fighting aggressively for the same mission. But we don't agree on 100% of things ourselves. Malcolm was making a point at a time before now, in a time before the last 30 years, because now things might get back to worse than they were then. But for the last 30 years, it might have been the best of times for Black people in this country. As much as we endured and as much as we went through, considering what we see coming, we might have just experienced the best of it. And what Malcolm was saying, as Ramses articulated it, but Ramses articulated it so smoothly, I want to put a little more of my mad back on it. A lot of people are simultaneously minority and white. And in moments of conflict, they can always go back
to being white.
Yeah. That's what Malcolm was talking about. Most conservative Democrats work and vote and create policy with conservative Republicans. Most liberal Republicans work with, have coffee with, and dinner with, and take vacations with people of the other party that share the same values. And the people who have been caught up as the pawn in that game for the entirety of this country, once we got a voice, quote unquote, is Black people. How do we manipulate people like James Harris and Director Paul or Phil or whatever his name is?
Doesn't matter. Into
thinking how we think and voting according to our interest and not their own. So because, as Ramses said, the aggressive agenda of those in charge in this country who have almost overwhelmingly been white. I think we just had our 4th Black senator ever. Something crazy like that. Or 4th Black woman senator. It's a really alarming stat. 4th ever. 1, 2, 3, 4 ever. you turn around and you look around and you realize no one is pushing our progress at the rate that we wish, because it's not their progress. It's not even more complicated than that.
That's well said. That's what
it's not their progress. Mm-hmm. So no, white liberals are not the superheroes that we wish they were. But some white people, I'm not going to call you liberal, conservative, Republican, or Democrat. Some white people spend their lives trying to help us. Yeah. That's a fact. We know some of them.
They give their
personally.
lives.
They have given and continue to give life, reputation, family, friendship to stand up for us.
Yeah.
So again, the point that Brother Malcolm was trying to make is well received. But to make it that the worst enemy to black people is the white liberal,
it's disingenuous and goofy.
Was not true, Brother Malcolm.
Well, I think you said it best. It was a misrepresented quote. It's something that is convenient for,
and if you Google that quote, because he goes on to give you
explain why
far more information and context, because it's a nuanced conversation that people like this remove the nuance from intentionally so that they can manipulate you.
Yeah.
And then present themselves as ally, as brother, as someone who's showing you the light and freeing you from being a brainwashed sheep.
And if either of these people, the James T. Harris person or this other Director Phil person, could convince me that Malcolm X would vote for Donald Trump, man, I would love to hear you do the mental gymnastics necessary to.
I'm sure they would try.
They would do their best, I'm sure, but I don't know that. Oh, I know they wouldn't succeed. That's just not realistic. It would be funny to watch them try, though, right? So that's that. We'll leave it right here. Now open the floor up to you. You got something to add? Of course, you can use the Red Microphone Talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. Outside of that, catch me on all social media. I'm at Ramses Ja.
I am Q Ward on all socials as well.
And hopefully we don't got to talk about these people no more. Until next time, y'all.
Peace.
This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the Red Microphone Talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.